Good morning to y'all. It is the 25th. Yes, the 25th of November. I am correct. In Australia, at least, right now it's the 24th of November. And if you are somebody who likes to join me from the United States of America, happy Thanksgiving to y'all. Give some thanks. Just give that thanks out. I've got a lot of shit on my desk, which is blocking a lot of light this morning. I'm gonna move some stuff around. Looks a bit better. All right. This is the SitRep. Welcome. Thanks for joining me, as always. Thanks to Bulge on YouTube, who said this sounds great because I actually have reset up Starlink at my place as a redundancy check to see if I want to switch over to the internet of it full time, because I've talked about this in the past, but the internet I can get through Starlink in my hometown is actually better than the NBN we get in Australia. So that's the National Broadband Network in Australia, the fastest internet we can get. Yet in my town where I live, it's slower than what I can get through Starlink. The issue with Starlink is that's download speed is orders of magnitude more. It's like at least 4 times more, or probably at least twice. But on an average day, it'll be 3 to 4 times faster. Download speed, upload speed though, not so much. So that's my issue. That's what I'm trying to figure out at the moment. That's why if YouTube is looking a bit buggy today, that could be the reason why. And I apologize. I know I'm always screwing around the YouTubes, or the YouTubes is always screwing me around. But anyway, that doesn't matter. If you're listening on YouTube that fails, you can always jump on Instagram or jump on your favorite podcast downloading app and listen to this in the audio version. If you are listening to this, thank you very much for downloading this. I appreciate it. What are we going to talk about today? So today I got sent a whole heap of things from my main source on Instagram, and one was really interesting. Now, this person knows that I don't use the Twitter machine a lot. They do use the Twitter machine, so they're actually one of my main sources through Twitter. They know the kind of stuff that I kind of track and look. They're on Twitter a lot, so they just feed that Twitter stuff to me. Now, this one is a feed or a series of messages from a person who is in Kyiv right now. And it's fascinating. I find it super fascinating from the perspective of prepping for an emergency. In particular, in this case, yeah, they're in a war zone. Well, Kyiv, I wouldn't say is a war zone right now, but the country is at war, but they're in a blackout, and blackouts can happen anywhere. I had a blackout last night. Funny story. In fact, we got hammered in my small town with, I want to say probably about 2 to 3 centimeters of hail. Everything was white. It looked like it was snowing here. And we're 5 days away from summer. Go figure. So anyway, apart from that, we did have a small blackout, which cut communications and things last night. But it just made me think. I'm reading this story and I'm like, what are you going to do in an extended blackout? So the main part of today, I'm going to be going through this guy's feed that was sent to me, just reading it out verbatim and then just having to think about it. There's some stories at the end too of world events. So if you're really into the world events, you can skip forward to that. Otherwise, hang about and listen to this tale of woe. It's not that bad. All right. So I'll just start reading off this and we'll pull out some interesting stuff. Ukraine civilians are keeping it together for now, but pressure will build the longer the power is out. The Soviet-era infrastructure will get harder and harder to repair and rebuild. So here's a thread of how one person is coping. Apologize to this person. Obviously, their first language is not English, so some of the grammar in here I'm going to try and smooth over to at least my Aussie version of English as best I can speak it. Me speaking England pretty good. So let's give it a crack. Good morning. Day 2 of the most recent Kyiv blackout. All right, let's stop there. Day 2. When was the last time you went 2 days without power where you weren't camping? Even camping nowadays, I've noticed, like, I had a whole heap of mates down and we went out camping for the weekend, old army mates. And I dragged my little electric generator out just so I could plug in a little fridge so I can keep some meats and stuff like that fresh. And I was surprised at how many people were like, "Oh, do you have power? Oh, I'll just plug in my phone, or I'll just plug this in." So yeah, there's this, reliance now on power that we really have. But 2 days already without power. So they're in the second day. Also, day 274 of the war. Really? Okay. Can we get a fact check on that? There's no one else here. It's just me. All right. There is no electricity, no heating, no water. The first question I asked was, how are you on your phone? But that aside, he does get to that point. Outside temperature is around freezing, and I have seen that there's snow on the ground at the moment in Kyiv. So freezing weather, no electricity, no heating, no water coming through. This person lives in a high rise, or in an apartment. So water has to get pumped up to these sort of things. This is something you need to think about if you live in an area where there isn't, what is it called? It's like external, or intrinsic water pressure, gravity fed water, essentially. So if you live in a place where water has to come downhill, it means that it pressurizes all your taps. If you don't live in a place like that, it means pumps are pumping your water to get to your house. So, which is surprising. This is something that's worth looking into. If you don't know how your water gets to your taps, you should probably look into that, because in a long-term blackout, that's the sort of thing that's going to run out. The apartment is still warm from the previous days. We will see how long it lasts. We have blankets, sleeping bags, warm clothes. I'm not too worried about heating until temperature goes below minus 10 degrees. That's centigrade. 14 degrees, I think he's got here, Fahrenheit, for those of you who haven't quite caught up to the metric system yet. But the water is another issue. The problem is toilets. Now, this was a really interesting one to me. I've thought about this a lot, and actually, I was talking about this with my partner recently, and she said, "What would we do in case of toilets?" And I said, "Well, I've got this backup, and we can always do this as well." But portable toilets and chemical toilets, and digging holes and all this sort of stuff. This is something that I think a lot of preppers don't really consider. Is we kind of think about that survival sense of things, but maybe don't go into the hygiene sense. But hygiene, the way I look at it, is first aid is a spectrum. And on one end is hygiene, because hygiene turns into first aid problems if you don't take care of it. And on the other side of that is comfort as well. So comfort, hygiene, first aid is this ongoing spectrum. So that it's really something we need to consider, because it's only going to take a couple of days of poor hygiene, of poor practices. If you don't think about what you're doing with your waste products, you are going to get very, very sick very quickly. And it's not just you who's going to get sick. It's the kind of sickness that can spread very quickly as well. So this is really something you need to think about. Hygiene, toilets. How are you going to flush that toilet? Because again, if your water is pumped in, it gets pumped into the cistern above the toilet and then gets flushed down, but then that cistern gets refilled. That's that noise. In case you don't know how a toilet works, which always surprised me how many people don't know how a fucking toilet works. This is how it works. You've got a cistern of water, which is a reservoir of water. You hit that button and it opens it up, and it allows that water to go in and flush your poo down the pipes, usually through an S-bend, so the smell doesn't get back. But then that cistern has to refill, and that's that sound of it refilling. So yeah, that's something you really got to think about. Just catching up with some comments here. Renee C, good morning to you. Was in Cyclone Larry. They were saying that they were in Cyclone Larry. Had no power for 3 days. Taught me a lot. This is really, really good lesson to learn. So I would love to hear some of the stuff that you actually did to get around that, Renee C. If you ever get the chance, fire me off an email or send me a message. We'd love to hear how you got through that. Peter Rouse says, luckily I have both gravity-fed and pump well water. City water supplies are screwed. Yep. I too have gravity-fed where I live, but I have pumps into a well where I live, which runs off electricity. But that electricity, I can connect that to my solar setup as well. So Peter Rouse says, I did a double septic tank using 6 tanks running on backup battery solar. Also, most importantly, is to keep spare parts on hand. Absolutely correct. Like, that's a super important thing to think about. What happens if your toilet breaks? I've had to jimmy together toilets before. Like, I've had a broken toilet, and there was a time period where a person couldn't come in to repair it. It wasn't like an emergency situation. But I had to, this is how I actually know about toilets. I had to pull it apart and go, okay, what am I looking at here? How do these work? And figure out what worked and figure out what had actually broken in those little plastic pieces that they use in the toilets. It's all plastic now. Figure out what was the key little thing that was a little clip that set this thing off that caused this to happen. It was like going back to my 8-year-old self and playing Mousetrap, which if you didn't grow up in the 80s, you probably, or 70s, you don't understand the joys that was Mousetrap, the board game. But just watching one thing, or maybe Home Alone might be a better thing. One thing triggers another thing, and then bang, you get this thing to work. That's how a toilet basically works, but a lot simpler. But make sure you got those spare parts or something that you can do to fix. Having tools, having parts, having stuff like that, as much as it annoys everyone around me and my family, because I've become some sort of hoarder, where I'm like, oh, this might come in handy. I'm just going to put this in this box. And what's this box full of just random shit? I'm like, well, might come in handy one day. Got to have those spare parts. All right, on with the story. So he was saying the problem is toilets. We have stockpiled about 100 liters of water. Now, that's great. 100 liters of water is a good start. I don't know how many people. He doesn't go into how many people live in this apartment. He is saying things like we. So I'm assuming there's more than just him in this apartment. 100 liters is a good start and I'm saying start. Working on a theory that we can go 3 liters per day per person, in a pinch. This is the sort of thing that we're talking about here. So 100 liters, if we got one person, like, we can extrapolate that out. That's like a month's worth of, or thereabouts, of water. If we've got 3 people, we cut that in 3. So it's no longer a month. It's now 10 days. If we've got 5 people, 6 people, et cetera, it starts to drop down. But here's a really important thing that obviously they haven't thought about. Okay, we need to flush toilets with that water as well, because that 3 liters, that's like drinking, that's preparing food, that's washing yourself, not necessarily flushing toilets, not necessarily washing clothes and doing all the other sort of stuff. So 100 liters all of a sudden, gets cut down quite a bit when you're having to flush toilets with it. So the other thing is that that's going to cut into your drinking water. So if you've got 100 liters squirreled away for an emergency, you don't want to be using your drinking water to flush your shit away, but you're going to have to, like I said, because hygiene problems become first aid problems very quickly. So you really want to think about having water that maybe isn't necessarily drinking water. It could be even shitty water. So just putting that away and having that as your refuse water, your grey water, things that you might use it to wash, you might use it to wash clothes, you might use it to water plants, you might use it to flush toilets and turn into black water. Peter Rouse says more like 10 liters per person per day. Yeah, when you start to factor in all these modern convenience things that we need to do, if we want a continuance of life the way we are living it, then we really do use a lot more water than you would think. So just think about that, because it's easy to read these sort of like survival manuals and stuff like that and go, 3 liters per person per day. Easy. But no, really think about it. Like, I often say, it is worthwhile actually doing an inventory of what you actually use, and don't fake it. If anything, fake it the other way. Budget in more. So sit there and go, how much water did I actually use today? It's a hard thing to measure, but here's a way you could maybe do it. Set up buckets in your shower. Set up a system of buckets or something around the house. So every time you drink some water, fill the same amount into that bucket. Every time you make a drink or you boil the kettle, fill that amount into the bucket. Every time you wash your hands, fill another cup into that bucket. And you'll start to figure out, you're like, oh shit, I do use a lot of water every day. Same with food. Like, really sitting there and writing down your food. It's a very anal thing to do, but you'd be surprised at how much you actually end up utilizing. And then don't get me started on energy. That's a whole another level. Anyway, back on with the story. This was an interesting one going on with water. There is also snow on our balcony. It is a surprisingly large supply of water, which is super interesting because snow is obviously frozen water, but it's aerated quite a bit in the tiny little flakes that have to fall down, and they don't just compact together instantly. They sort of are fluffed out a lot of the time. So I have tried this myself whenever I've been in snow, which is not very often, but I've obviously talked to a lot of people who have been in snowy areas and have tried to melt down snow, and they always talk about this, kind of ratio where a big cup full of snow will give you about 10% of water. So it's interesting that he's saying that's giving us a surprisingly large amount of water. But that's cool. This is something you need to think about. There is a follow-up to this as well, where somebody posted a comment of a photo of them on their balcony with a pot full of snow and said, "Hey, we didn't even think about this. Thank you very much." And I love that kind of thing where people's preps, people's disaster stories or emergency stories are helping other people. That's kind of one of the reasons that I do all this, that we're trying to help other people. We're trying to encourage other people. We're trying to share our ideas and our knowledge amongst more people. Hoset John says, in Norway, we say snow becomes approximately 1 to 10 water. So yeah, awesome. That's what I had heard as well. Every time, he says, but every time I go there to get it, as in get that snow, I have to let the cold air in. So it's this compromise now that we're going, okay, I need water, so I need to go outside and get the snow. I need to open the door. But every time I open the door, because I can't heat the house, I'm letting cold air in. So it lowers the temperature of the house. It's this really interesting compromise. And it made me really think like, shit, what would I do? How would I do that? Kind of like yelling at your kids like, hey, shut the fridge door. How would you make that? Like you're going to have to really be strategic about this sort of stuff. So make sure you got all your pots lined up and you're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do it quickly. Open the door, pack, bring them in, close it, and that's it. Don't open it again for the rest of the day. For now, the cell network is up, although the quality varies. I found that pretty interesting. Thus, I have internet. Internet is critical for food. This was interesting because I'm totally like, yep, I get it. And I thought, this is going to be interesting to people because people don't think about this. Why is internet critical for food? Yesterday, we went to a grocery store to buy up a bit more stuff in case there will be shortages. Great idea. Love it. Food is there. There's no lines either. That I found interesting. I'm like, okay. Yep, okay. That I wouldn't have necessarily thought that. I would have thought it might be harder to get food, but it's still there and there's no lines and people can get ready access to it. So that's super interesting and good. Food is there, no lines. The challenge is to pay. Most registers work with cash only. Boom, like there. I was like, yep, that's something I've talked about in the past. And I really recommend people do have cash on hand, whatever you can afford. So I do this. I have it squirreled away in different areas. I've got cash in my wallet, obviously. Not obviously, actually, because for a long time, I wasn't carrying any cash in my wallet. I was just like, what's the need anymore? Like, we're moving on from that. But then I thought, no, I've got to fight that tendency. Put cash in the wallet. I've got cash squirreled away in each of the cars that we utilize in the family. In case you get stuck somewhere, you got to pay for fuel. I've got cash like in different parts of my home squirreled away enough that I can like go right, bang, in an emergency. This is enough to buy heavily inflated food, heavily inflated petrol, heavily inflated water, whatever it is that I need. I've got the cash to do that, and it is in cash. It's not in anything else. Is it a concern because of inflation? Yeah, but every emergency that I've ever seen, exactly this has happened, especially natural disasters. Exactly this has happened. When the internet goes down, places are like, we've got the fuel, we'll give you the fuel, but you have to give us cash. That's all there is to it. So cash is still king. So registered to work with cash only. Just a few are connected to accept credit cards, though through cell network. The banking system is stable, but I'll go get some cash in case the telecom companies or banks go down. So, like I'm reading this, I was just like lighting up, and it's like, wow, this dude is like, this is prepping, right? This is what in our society, and I'm saying our society as in Australia, New Zealand, US, UK, Norway, maybe Norway. I reckon my experience of people from Norway and Sweden has been they're more preparedness minded at a level, whereas Australian New Zealanders are generally not. But this sort of stuff where I'm looking at this going, see how this stuff makes sense. This is a normal individual living in an apartment who's going like, oh, hey, I hadn't thought about this. Hey, I did think about this. Hey, I'm doing this. If this was a person in Australia right now saying this stuff, people will be going, all right, crazy tinfoil hat prepper man, doomsdayer, you like psycho, settle down. The nukes aren't falling, mate. But he got the example of why this is a very smart thing to do. It's a normal, smart thing to do. Hosit John says, blankets before the door as a curtain, great idea. I'd love to see someone try to take your shit, mate. Peter Rouse says, another reason to have a hidden safe for cash. Yes, I believe so. And I would also encourage people to have forms of protection around their house. In a form that you can dissuade people from even coming to your house. So you've got things up that people look at and go, I don't really want to go around there. Things like floodlights, things like security cameras. You can actually deny entry to people. So you're actually physically locking your doors, your windows, stuff like that. And then, deterring people if they were to come in, and maybe even forcing defense if you had to. Read between the lines of that one. Y'all get it. I'm an advocate. All right, continuing on with this. So we're just talking about this. He's worried about the telecommunications or the banks going down, so he's going to go pull out cash. Our stove is electric. No electricity, no cooking food. This means no warm food until the electricity is back. The place that I rent at the moment, our stove is electric. That's one of the main reasons why I've got a portable solar generator that I can plug in case of emergency. But I also have a couple of different. I've got my gas barbecue, obviously, because I'm Australian, and I'm not sure you can actually be Australian without having a barbecue. What are you going to chuck on the barbie if you don't have a barbie, mate? But I've got that and backup gas bottles, LPG bottles, several. I've also got those little butane cookers as well. And then I've got lightweight cookers in some hiking stuff. So I've got many ways to cook food. And this has happened. I have had to pull these out and actually test these preps when we've had a blackout that lasted 6 hours right over a period where we were halfway through cooking a delicious stew. And I'm just like, all right, well, I can either let that go to waste sitting there, or we can just continue cooking on that. So we set that up. Problematic when we're starting to get into these sort of things cooking inside. You really got to think about this sort of stuff. You can't just have any sort of cooker inside going. So think about that as well. You might have to have adequate ventilation for these sorts of things. Love this comment from him though. So no warm food until electricity is back. This is not fun. No shit. We have to fix it. There are two parts to our plan. Firstly, we'll buy an equivalent of a home Tesla battery. So thinking about solar electricity there, about their own intrinsic store of electricity within their domicile. Good idea. So it can be charged when there is electricity. Maybe you could even think about getting solar panels as well. If you've got a balcony there, you've got the ability to collect solar electricity. This will also solve somewhat the heating problem, as we have already bought some electric heaters. So they've got electric heaters, but they can't use them because they don't have electricity. bit of an issue there. But the electricity might be off for a long time, and so we need gas or wood cooking equipment. Yes, this is the sort of stuff that you got to think about. Again, within my levels of camping preparedness, I would say, I've got many wood cooking systems, from large, if I'm going camping in a family sort of sense, big heavy things that are going to get loaded into a car that I can load wood into, and it will provide heat, it will provide hot water, it will provide cooking, it can even provide smoking of meats. I've got that, to tiny little portable ones where I can just stick sticks in and boil water or cook food. So these are things that you want to think about. And as I said, these are my camping supplies. All right. So if you're sitting there looking at this going, I don't want to spend all this money on these preps that I'm never going to use, you should be out there camping. You should be out there doing this sort of stuff anyway, going out hiking, or at least if you've got these things, it might encourage you to get out there more, get out in nature a bit more. But that's usually the way I justify these purchases to myself. By the way, Black Friday deals, there are deals happening right now. Peter Rouse says, always carry my protection even at home. Love to hear it. All right, so cooking equipment, look, talking about gas or wood cooking equipment. I guess we have to go shopping. Stores work, they run huge diesel generators. So the stores are using diesel generators to keep the power on, which was interesting. University runs too. The underground shelter and the first floor are powered up by a generator. So he's talking about these places that work: stores, the university, the underground shelters, and the first floor of, I assume, of his building are powered by generators. There is independent heating, food, and satellite internet, which I'm guessing is maybe the one that I'm using right now, being Starlink. This is, again, this is interesting stuff to me. Like, where are they actually putting their energy, their efforts? Where are they allowing these things to be turned on and maybe shutting these things down? The university, that one spun me out. I was like, what? Stores, yeah, I totally get it. Keep stores running, people can get supplies, things like that. Underground shelters, okay, yep, people need to go into these, especially in a war zone. First floor of buildings, if that's all you can power, then that's all you can power. And by the way, the other question I had for this person immediately was like, okay, you're saying this stuff, but you're doing this on a phone, tweeting it. So where are you getting energy to power this phone? Maybe they can go down and power their devices in other people's apartments or whatever. And if so, why isn't water getting up to you? Says that right here. Water is a problem there too, though. If I don't think too much about it, the day feels normal. Just no breakfast. So that was an interesting part to it as well. We're adaptive as human beings. And I have seen this and felt this, being somebody who has spent extended periods in war zones in my life, in the former life when I was in the military, being somebody who's been in disaster zones, being somebody who's been in cities of states of collapse, working in and around with journalists and things like that, helping keeping them secure and helping them report. I've seen a lot of this stuff, and you do adapt to it very quickly, and people adapt to it very quickly as well. So that's one thing to think about. I think that doesn't often get discussed, that we kind of think like a disaster happens and we're going to go all Mad Max. There might be periods of that. There might be a little bit of that. There might be people who do that. But the average person, I think, is going to maintain a semblance of normalcy wherever they can. And that, for me, is one of the huge things about prepping, is to try to maintain a semblance of normalcy for me and my family and my friends and my extended mutual assistance group, and maybe my community if I can stretch it that far. Being that I don't want to just survive. Like, it's not, survival is the primary goal. That's the first part of it. But beyond that, we can actually look at, once we've got that sorted, we can then look at, having things a bit normal. And Peter Rouse hits the nail on the head right here on YouTube with this comment. No day is normal without a coffee in the morning. I could not agree with you more. That's why coffee is a big part of my preps. I can actually make a nice little espresso, and it requires 0 electricity. And my long-term coffee stores are getting there. They're getting there. They're not perfect yet, and I'm going to start building them up a bit, but it's getting there. Kieran says water's going to be a huge issue. I've heard it's going to be pretty soon. Yes, I mean, certainly here in this guy's story from Kyiv, he's struggling with getting water up into his apartment. Us here in Australia could be a problem at some stage. It's certainly not right now. We just got hit by 50 mil of rain overnight and hail, as I said. So it is saturated here at the moment, but other parts of the world, not so much. Like I said yesterday, Arizona, there's a town that's going to run out of water, like literally just run out of water by the end of the year. So this I found super interesting, this guy's little story. So I've relayed that to you now, his little Twitter feed, which was sent to me by one of my main sources. Yeah, super interesting stuff there, and something we can all learn. There's heaps of lessons there for us all. There was lessons for me where I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. Or if I was in an apartment, how would I cook? Like he said, we need to get wood burning devices. I'm like, well, you can't just chuck any old wood burning device in an apartment, mate. Like there's some problems that could come out of that. Carbon monoxide poisoning for starters. So you really want to think about how you're setting this sort of stuff up and what's going to happen in an emergency. But at the key thing, like I started with, 2 days without energy, they're expecting a lot more. And I think he's absolutely correct in that summation, because Russia has been hammering, like very much focused targeting Ukraine's energy supply. So they've been hammering it. So yeah, they could go a long time without electricity here. Always fascinated by these kinds of stories. The stories that came out of like Kosovo around that conflict, the people on the ground there, those stories are fascinating, like super interesting, and we can all learn from these sorts of things. I believe every day is a school day. I'm always trying to learn more. So I'm very appreciative for this individual here who put this information up and actually told us, like, hey, how's life going in Kyiv? And one of the key things, the last key thing that I'll talk about is his disaster. Here's 2 days without electricity, can't get water, must get cash to get food, all these sorts of things happening. Also, life's pretty normal, just no breakfast. So think about that, that the disaster and the normalcy that gets mixed in with these sorts of things. It's not all just doom and gloom. It's not all bad. There are parts of normal. I like to say to people, I bounced in and out of Afghanistan for about 10 years, over a decade, right? And people are like, oh, Mark, that must have been hell. And I'm like, no, I mean, most of the time it's a normal day there, right? War isn't happening everywhere all the time, 24/7. There's tiny little portions where it explodes out, and it is extremely intense, the most intense thing you'll ever see or experience. And then the rest of the time, it's nothing. It's just people going about their life. So have a think about that. All right. Where are we? 33 minutes. I'll quickly jump into some other stories now, just changing gears. But this one's still to do with Ukraine. Another story sent to me by my source. US concerned Russia could use chemical weapons in Ukraine. What I read into this story, like we'll see, we've already seen stuff like this being talked about. We will see more about it. Could they use chemical weapons in Ukraine? Yeah, it's totally feasible that they do it. However, once bitten, twice shy. Okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame. You can't fool me twice. Famous quote there from a former US president. What this smacks of to me is US, UK coming out and saying we have to go into Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction. They've got the WMDs. We have to go stop them. Then that started a war. That war reached its conclusion. How many WMDs did they find? And it came out later that yeah, it was known by them that they were lying. And everyone got told, hey, these guys were lying. Tony Blair, he lied to you. I'm blanking on his name, George W. Bush, he was lying to you. All these politicians were lying to us, and we went and fought a war, and people got maimed and killed and destroyed. People died. Places were wiped off the map because they wanted to go into Iraq. They need to legitimize their war. And what did everyone do when we found out that information? That was the key thing for me. I'm like, oh, this is it. No, the average person was like, oh, okay, well, it's all over now. It's not all over now, because you're going to do the same fucking thing. And that's what this smacks of to me. It's like, Russia could use chemical weapons, and that's the big no-no. So, like, everyone get ready to fight. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But it just smacks of this, hey, we're preparing you for war and we need an excuse to drag you into it. The Department of Defense in the US has issued statements on the escalating actions in Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, which you all know that I'm quite interested in being in this part of the world that I've visited before. So, you know, I kind of know it, not very well, but, you know, I've spent a little bit of time there. Department of Defense has, right. The interesting part is that I was talking about this yesterday. I said, if Turkey's pushing into northern Syria, Kurdistan, and US has interests in there, isn't that kind of Turkey versus the US now? Isn't that going to drag US into it? Well, this was released overnight. So yeah, US is starting to get interested in this, and they're saying, look, we're deeply concerned by escalating actions in northern Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. This escalation threatens the global coalition to defeat ISIS's years-long progress to degrade and defeat ISIS. So they're linking this to the ISIS issue, which it always has been linked to that. But this is the first step, I think, from US to say, like, hey, we don't want this. What they're asking for here is de-escalation in the area. We need to bring this back down because this could cause ISIS to rise up. Also, we won't be able to get oil out of there. But no, mainly ISIS. I'm going to continue monitoring that space, looking at this. I'm interested to see what US's actions are. This is the words. I'm interested to see what their actions are around this. Speaking of actions, I'll stay with words first. Here's some words. China came out and has urged NATO to not exceed its geographical limits, being that NATO wants to push down into this area. They've made overtures to coming down into the Taiwan Strait conflict and this sort of issue. And China's saying, hey, NATO, back in your box, thanks. Northern Atlantic over there, thank you very much. This ain't the Northern Atlantic, friend. This is the Pacific, or this is the South China Sea in particular, but you're not welcome here. So this is the first sort of big pushback, I think, from China to go, like, NATO, back off, like, this isn't yours. Again, interesting to see what NATO does. I believe NATO, and I've been talking, especially my main source on Instagram, been talking about this. I think NATO is going to make an extended push to come down into this area and start formalizing their power, if you will, within this area. But again, that's words. Let's talk about actions here. This one's financial news. Okay, sometimes I'm looking through financial news to see what's going on because big money shows us something. People don't like to waste money. That's a lie. People love to waste money. If you look what big businesses, what big corporations are doing, this is a really good way, I think, you can see which way the wind is blowing. So the world's biggest arms makers are scaling up production of rocket launchers, tanks, and ammunition as the industry shifts to meet what executives expect to be a sustained demand triggered by the war in Ukraine. All right, that's a convenient reason, the extended demand in the war in Ukraine. Yes, I get that. That's pretty obvious, but that's the issue. To me, that's pretty obvious. If they're saying, hey, we're ramping things up, I feel they're seeing something else. These people, like I said, they're not just willy-nilly doing things. They're not just like, hey, let's ramp up production of ammunition. Why not? They do things because they know they can make money off it. So that's what I feel they're doing here. They're going, all right, we can make money here. There's money to be had. Let's actually do this. Why are they doing it? I think they're making the same assessment that you and I are making, where they're going, Taiwan's going to kick off soon. Turkey, Syria is kicking off. Iran, Israel, Iran, Kurdistan, Turkey, Greece, Turkey, Kurdistan, like North Korea, South Korea, all these conflict zones. Yes, they're going in a direction, and it's not a direction of peace right now. They are increasing. So these companies are getting ahead of the curve because they can see the writing on the wall. World War III. This is an indicator, yet another data point that I want to throw to you. And you make up your own mind. That assessment is mine. That these people are very smart. They're very canny. They don't do things by accident. So watch that space. Last one is a bit of a what the is going on moment here. There is a growing number of scientists who are calling on the sun to be dimmed in the name of geoengineering. Of course, this is actually something that's has been bandied around quite a bit for a number of years. And it does my head in a little bit because I grew up in the 80s. And I'll explain why that's important in a second. Global warming, all right? That's what most of us know, or climate change now, but before that, it was global warming. All right, so global warming in the 90s, early 2000s, then we were like, change, like it gets warmer and that makes rain come down, and then it gets colder, and it's just all over the shop now. It's just change. People are worried about it. The greenhouse effects, right? The greenhouse gases, they go into the atmosphere. They mean the sun can come in and get blocked in here and exacerbates the heat, blah, blah, blah. So there's an idea, well, maybe we can put reflective particulate into our atmosphere. Great idea. Which will block the sun. I just want to point out, I don't know what this war on the sun is all about. The only thing I can think of is that it is a nefarious, evil mastermind who has a shtick for anti-life. The sun is literally what gives the earth life. Everything, every single thing on this planet somehow is touched by the sun in some connected way, right? But the main life as we know it, as in humans, animals, plants, and such what, thrives from sun. We are sunlight. That's all there is to it. Like, that's the only thing. Even everything we put in our mouths to sustain us was harvested. Some hippies that believe that you can just stare at the sun and that's all you need. I don't think so, but it does need to be converted into some other things. It's a convoluted process, but photosynthesis through plant life that's taken up by us or taken up by another animal, and then we eat that animal, blah blah blah. Anyway, blocking out the sun, not a great idea. Go and watch what's that, the Snowpiercer series. See how it worked out for them. That's obviously a fictional series, all right? I don't believe that's a true thing. It's not a documentary, but it's an interesting thought, because that's exactly what happens. The idea of that is that at some stage the scientists said, hey, things are getting too hot, let's block out. But it's an interesting thought, because that's exactly what happens. The idea of that is that at some stage the scientists said, hey, things are getting too hot, let's block out the sun. And then they did it too well and the earth freezes over. Now, back to the 80s thing, we're all about not using hairspray in the 80s. That was a big no-no, because you're pumping CFCs into the atmosphere. There's holes in the ozone layer. The issue in the 80s that we used to get hammered with kids was that we're going into an ice age. Oh, what the? If people are wondering why, you go like, what's with these people who deny climate change? They're crazy. They're crazy people. Well, this could be part of the reason why these people are crazy, is that in the 80s, we're told we're going to freeze to death. In the 90s, we're told we're going to boil to death. Now we're getting told that it's just everything. It's just a fucking mess. So, yeah. Wanting to freeze the world over, it's an anti-life scheme. That's the only way I can look at it. Same thing as like, don't go in the sun, you'll get skin cancers and die. It's anti-life. Anti-sun is anti-life. anti-life. And anything that is anti-life, like nihilism, like communism, anything that's anti-life, I am anti. I'm anti-life. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Peter Rouse says the Tonga eruption just did that for them, and I think you might be correct. The little that I've actually looked into this, I think you might be correct. The Tonga eruption, I think, has had more of an effect on our planet's weather system than people are actually giving credit for, average people, and it warrants further discussion and investigation. So yeah, really, really interesting stuff. Layman's Grove says, in the Matrix, they also blocked out the sun. Correct. Didn't work. Just harvested humans for their heat. So yeah, there we go. Geoengineering, blocking out the sun. It's particulates, it's reflective particulates put into our atmosphere, which no doubt will have a great effect for humans, but will also block out the sun. Chemtrails, it's all coming together now. All right, that's my tinfoil hat for today. That's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me, as always. I hope you enjoyed the little story that I put out there at the start, the reading of that guy's Twitter feed. Some really valuable lessons there that are coming out of the Ukraine, Kyiv in particular. Always good to learn for lessons. It's never good that there are disasters and things like that happen in the world, but I think ignoring them is not the right tactic. This is one thing that I always try and get across to people, especially on my courses, that sure, you can live a life of bliss sticking your head in the sand, but that doesn't stop bad things from happening in the world. So when bad things do happen, we need to actually open our eyes to them to a certain extent and go, okay, well, what can I learn from this? So really interesting stuff there from that thing. I hope you learned something from it. I certainly did. There are some things that I'm going to start focusing on, and especially, not that I'm not pro buying shit, but there are deals at the moment that you can take advantage of, being Black freaking Friday. All right, gang, that's it for today. Thank you very much. As always, send any questions through, send any stories through, or things that you find amusing or think that I might find interesting. But until next time, gang, Semper Paratus.